Hello and welcome to the channel, or welcome back to the channel, either way. I'm Nick. I make videos about things that I like, things that I'm interested in. Usually that's either gaming stuff or design stuff. Today we're going to be focusing on more of the design stuff. So yeah, today's video is going to be the second to last in our Hobolite series. In case you've not seen the other two, which is seemingly pretty likely. The last video I did was focused on the Hobolite Micro, and then the previous one to that was focused on the Hobolite Iris, both of which I'm using to film this video. If you're interested in either of those, if you're maybe in the market for one of these lights, go check those videos out. These aren't reviews. I'm doing kind of a design breakdown and design analysis kind of thing, So not reviews. The review will be coming ideally next week, where we kind of compare all three of them, kind of figure out which one might be the best value, which one you might want to buy, and why you might want to buy each individual one. That, again, that's coming next week. This week is the last in the kind of more design analysis-y kind of focused videos. Two things. One, I'm not sponsored. Hobolite don't know I'm making this. They don't know who I am. I'm not getting any kickbacks. I paid for all of these lights, and yeah, this video is not sponsored. Second thing, in case you couldn't tell, this video is also not scripted. The last two have not been scripted either, and that's just because I want to get my raw feelings, my raw emotions about these lights out, my raw thoughts about them out, in a kind of more organic way than having it be scripted. So, like I said, today's video is going to be about this, the Hobolite Mini. As you can probably tell if you saw last week's video, this is largely the same design as the Hobolite Micro. And that kind of feeds into how I want to kind of structure this video. I think this is a really great example of the design process and design iteration, and how you can improve on an existing design by iterating on it and making changes and implementing feedback and including the user in your design of a product. The reason that I think that this is a good example of that is because this was the first light that Hobolite released in this more budget range of lights. The kind of sequence was the Mini, then the Micro, and then the Iris. So we can kind of look at the changes going from one to the next and see what changes they may have made and speculate as to why they may have made those changes. Yeah, all I can do is sit here and speculate in my armchair. But let's start talking about why it is I think that this is a good example of the design process. The first thing I'll start with is the overall design. So obviously, if you've seen the Hobolite Micro, then you'll know that the Mini and the Micro share a very similar overall formal design, and that's pulling very heavily on inspiration from the Hasselblad cameras. This very vertical box kind of format, and that breaks from the kind of traditional design of studio lights, which are usually very long, kind of tubular. That's kind of their main thing with all of their lights, is to be interesting and beautiful, not just functional. And that carries through to all of their lights. They all have an extraordinarily large amount of personality, and that's something that I do really love about this lineup and Hobolite as a whole. I think they have a really good grasp on their design identity. They have a really good grasp on what they want their style to be and how they want to achieve that. So that's something that I really respect. And that's something that you can see in all of three of these lights and all of their products, really. Overall, the designs are largely the same. The proportions are effectively the exact same. The actual, the knobs that they use are the same. The display that they use is the same. The fonts and logos and writing all of that stuff is pretty much exactly the same, which is good because then you have a consistent design language. If somebody buys both of these lights, once they learn how to use one of them, they know how to use the other one. And that's really great. That is good UX UI. And in general, they're all really intuitive. They did make some significant changes, and these changes, I think, are for the better. Now, this was the first to release out of all three of these lights, and so I think it's a really good point of comparison that we can use to see what they changed and why they changed it. Well, speculate as to why they changed it. The first of which being these leather side panels. So on their next light that they made after this one, the Hobolite Micro, they added some thin black bezels around the leather panels. And that was a really good choice, in my opinion. The reason is because on this Hobolite Mini, you can see fairly easily the variation in the seam between the actual light housing and the leather panel itself. This is just a piece of fake leather that's been kind of glued on with some kind of adhesive, and so it's unavoidable that you're going to have inconsistencies with how this is cut out, where it's placed when it's actually being assembled. If you're fixturing something with glue or adhesive, there is always potential for it to slip and slide a little bit before it actually cures or, gets fully stuck to where it is. So there's always going to be variation between these seams. So allowing for that variation is kind of important, right? Because if that's unavoidable, you need to figure out a way to get around that and design around that. They didn't do that on this light. So you can see those variations. You can see the defects, if you will, in the manufacturing of this light. And that's something that they changed on the Micro. With that black bezel, you really get a much better separation between the leather panel and the rest of the housing. Because anywhere where there would be a seam or a crack or something a gap that you'd be able to notice is now covered in black plastic. That gap, that seam is still there, but it's much less noticeable because instead of having that gap be between the leather and the housing itself, it's now between that leather and a black piece of plastic. And black, being the color of shadows, means that your eye will kind of merge any inconsistencies to an extent, but it will merge any inconsistencies into just being part of that black bezel. So that helps significantly cut down on how this leather panel fits into the rest of the design, and fits into the rest of the unit in general. And because this is important because they're going for a premium feel and a more high-end product. These are the kind of things that people will notice if you're paying $300 for a light as opposed to if you're paying $50 for a light. You can't get away with as much if you're paying more if your customers are paying more for that light, because they're going to be way more discerning. So that change, I think, really helps with the Micro in making it fit into that expectation of quality and that intended feeling. So yeah, that's something that I really respect about this team. They clearly saw that this was a problem. They clearly saw that, maybe our manufacturing just isn't up to the task of making sure that gap is uniform. And that's fine. That's going to happen. That's something that you don't necessarily have control over. What you do have control over is your design. And they took control and implemented a change that I think just really helps sell the feeling of quality. That being said, I do like this design. I do like the idea of having just leather straight to this kind of titanium finish. I do think it looks premium. It does look quality. It's just that when you get a little bit closer, it kind of falls apart in the execution. But I do think that it is a good look, and I understand why they may have wanted to achieve this. It's just unfortunate that they weren't really able to. But the solution that they came up with, I think works really well. I think it works exquisitely compared to this particular decision. Similar to that complaint is the screen. I don't understand why they keep doing this. They keep just kind of slapping the screen on. It doesn't feel integrated to me. And, you know, it's not going to be possible to make every single bit feel super integrated, especially in a more cheap product. That unfortunately is something that kind of just comes with price, but I do think that there's a few things that they could have done which would have just made it feel worlds better than it currently does, and worlds better than any of the 3 screens that I have available to me currently do. And that is rounding off the corners. I don't understand why they're able to give it black bezels. There's clearly some kind of process here for making the rest of the glass black, but not the screen. So why not just make those corners round? Is it possibly a manufacturing limitation? Maybe. I don't know exactly what process they're using here, but I feel like it could be done. And the reason that I feel like they should do that is not just because I think soft corners look good. I think you can do sharp corners and make it look good. I don't think all screens need to have round corners, but if the rest of your design language leans into that, and the rest of your design language does have round corners, you should, if you're attaching a screen to that product, also round those corners. It's the similar reason to why Macs do it. It's a similar reason to why phones do it. It would look weird to have a rounded corner on your physical product and then have immediately next to that, butting right up into it, just a 90-degree edge. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't feel good. It's jarring. It doesn't flow with the rest of the design language, and it makes that one piece, no matter how high resolution it might be, no matter how good it might look, it makes it look slapped on. So that's a small thing that kind of bugs me about all 3 of these lights, is that all of their screens just have these 90-degree angles, and I cannot for the life of me understand why. Other than maybe a manufacturing limitation, in which case, fine, it's not a big deal, but I want it. And that's it. Especially since right around it, right next to it, in the actual bezel, in the transition from the housing to the actual piece of glass, is a rounded edge. So like, hello? Clearly they know that looks good with the rest of this design, with the rest of the soft edges and rounded elements. So what is it? Why? But okay, enough of that one complaint. Overall, I think the screen and controls region is fine. I don't think it's dysfunctional, but it is less than it could be, we'll say. I think it could be better. While we're on the topic of the screen, though, you'll notice that this one is placed on top. For the design inspiration, I think that makes a lot of sense. These are designed to imitate Hasselblad cameras, which are famously known for being interacted with like this, looking straight down. That's not usually how you use a light. You probably won't have your light down below your eye level. It's possible, but it's not likely. One explanation I could find for this is that it's maybe because they're intending for this system to be used more for product photography, but then the ad copy on their website kind of conflicts with that because they show it being used for portraits and things like that. So I'm a little bit iffy on that. I think that this was changed in the micro specifically because of what I'm saying. These are not going to be interacted with looking down at them most of the time. Most of the time they're going to be on some kind of stand, either a C-stand or a tripod of some kind or a gobo arm. They're going to be up high. And the reason for that is because when you're shooting with studio lights, unless you have some kind of diffusion going on, they're going to be very harsh. And so given that these don't really have much in the way of meaningful diffusion, they do have these diffusion filters, which we can touch on briefly. They do have diffusion filters, but they're nothing compared to like a softbox. They don't make a softbox for this, as far as I'm aware, or any of these cheaper lights. That's relegated to their much higher end lights. And so if you're using a light like this, you want to get it as far away as possible, is what I'm getting at. So these are going to be high up. They're going to be up there and out of the way of your eyesight. They're not going to be down below you. So with that in mind, putting the screen on top might not be the best idea. So I think that that's probably why they made that change from the top down to the back for the micro. And I think that was a good change. I think that was a good change to make. But yeah, so that's the screen section. Overall, I really like it. I think it works fine for what I need it for. The controls feel good. You know, the screen itself looks good. There's some things I would change, but there's always things that I would change. And they made some really meaningful changes coming from this light to the micro. So that's awesome. I really like that. Coming off of the screen, we'll bring it around front to this front element. This I have a lot of mixed feelings about. I really like that they give you the control of a built-in telescoping kind of lens, which basically just gives you a more narrow or more wide spread. It's nice to have. I would say it's not necessary, and so them removing it from the micro I don't think is really taking away any value between these two. But what I really have mixed feelings about, what I really don't enjoy about using this light, is the experience of using the barn doors that are included with it. So that's these things. If you're not familiar with barn doors, they're these guys. Weird name, don't know where it comes from. But the experience of using these is significantly different and significantly worse in one key way to that of the micro. These are designed to fit onto this front element and then be screwed down, and they have this little kind of groove that locks them into place. Now that's fine. It holds them in place. It works, but it's wobbly. It's not as secure as the one on the micro. And that's because this one's not using magnets. This makes for a much more tedious setup and breakdown process. You have to screw and unscrew these barn doors to get them on and off. And that's just like one step better than just having the inside of this and the outside of this be threaded and having to screw them on that way. That's just like one step better than that. The micro took this idea, right? The storied idea of putting barn doors on a light to direct the light, and just added a magnetic ring. They just added MagSafe, and that's awesome. Adding MagSafe to things is always a good choice, and it's always a good option. If you have the opportunity to do it, do it. Now, I am a mechanical fixture kind of guy. I do prefer mechanical fixtures. This one is not better. I don't think the magnetic strength would be an issue. So I think that is something that really holds this specific light back. From a function standpoint, absolutely not. From a function standpoint, the barn doors work perfectly well. They direct the light where it needs to go. They do their job. This is just a great example to me of Hobolite seeing that poor user interaction, maybe observing some photographers using this system and seeing that, oh, that's a bit of a hassle. It's not the best feeling interaction to put it on and then with it fully tightened down, still feel it wobble around and stuff like that. That's not the best. It's not the best experience. Maybe we can change that. Maybe we can improve that. And they did with a magnetic ring. Technically not MagSafe, but a magnetic ring array of magnets. Great, awesome. I love that. That is, for me, kind of a cornerstone of good design, is seeing what works and what doesn't and changing it to make it work better for the people that you're making your product for. Clearly, I think that they saw that this was not the best system, and once they kind of found their ideal solution, they implemented it, and that was really great. It is a significantly better experience to use the barn doors on the Micro, and that's why we need this process of design, iteration, ideation, talking to your users, listening to your users. When I was in school, and I'm gonna go on a bit of a tirade here, so I'll put a timestamp too if you want to just skip this. But when I was in design school, we had a model making class, and we had it was model making. We had a model making class, and our teacher had invited a designer who had worked on the Apple Watch. I love the teacher. This is not against them inviting this person, but when they were telling us about designing specifically the Apple Watch, they said effectively they were telling us, your users, they don't know what they want. Your users, you can talk to them, but it's just suggestions. What they tell you is bad about a product is just a suggestion. They don't know what they want. You, as the designer, you know what they want. And I don't know if I was misinterpreting his words. Maybe not. But to me, that was that told me everything that I needed to know about Apple and how they design. And this is stuff that I had already kind of known about Apple. I think we all know that Apple designs things that way. But hearing it come from somebody who worked on an Apple product, who worked at Apple, was just different to me. And so that's something that I really like seeing in products. When I can kind of tell that, they've seen that this doesn't work. This interaction, this isn't working for our customers. Let's change it. They're not getting hung up on oh, but I had this really cool idea for how you could fixture it to the light. No, they're trying to make their product better to use for their users. And I really like that. I really like when companies make changes to their products based on what their users want and kind of what their users have told them that they want. All right, rant over. We'll get back to the Hobolite Mini and the last thing that I would like to touch on, and that is physical interactions that are not real. What I'm talking about is buttons that don't do anything, dials that don't do anything, things that sure might look good, but don't do anything. And specifically on this light, that's this Griblis right here. On props, I love them because you don't have to actually interact with the prop. But things like this are really bad. In my opinion, this is an extremely bad choice. This doesn't do anything on this light. It does on their higher end lights, And it does on the micro, and we'll get to that. But it doesn't on this light. It's literally just here. And that's bad for a couple of reasons. One, because it can be confusing. For the first time that you interact with this, you might think that this does something, right? And press it and interact with it and try and figure out what it does, but it ultimately does nothing. It's completely solid, just molded into the metal. And that's disappointing. And that's the other point. This is a disappointing interaction, and that is the opposite of what you want people to feel when they use your product. Disappointed. If there was something that you could do with it, even if it was like an accessory that interacted with it, I would think that's fine. I think it looks fine visually, and again, it calls back to Hasselblad's cameras, and that's, it's a valid choice, but it's one I disagree with, especially because they know how to make good physical interactions. They know how to make dials and knobs and adjustment rings that feel good and do things, but this one doesn't. And that sucks, because all of the rest of this leaves me feeling really happy and good and excited about using it again. But this one thing, yes, this is a small complaint. This is a bit of a nitpick. Ultimately, I can just ignore it. I know it doesn't do anything, but it's the fact that it's there. The fact that it looks like it should do something, and it doesn't. I don't think I would take points away from this for that reason. I think it was a poor decision. And they changed it in the micro, which proves me right. It proves to me that they agree that it's a poor choice. Because on the micro, they actually gave it a purpose. They moved it around slightly and up a little bit, but they gave it a purpose. They made it do something. That, on the micro, it's the release for this front element ring. And that's all it takes, All it takes is making this do something, anything. Maybe it could be like a quick on-off button, a sleep button, something. Make it do something. But no, it doesn't do anything, and that's disappointing. But enough of my nitpicking. We will round this video out by basically just saying, I think this is a really well-made light. I think it's extremely fun to use. I know I've been really pretty negative in this video, but everything feels really good about it, which is what makes those changes so important to me. This is a bad product compared to its successor, but that's good. All of the changes that were made to this light, going from this to the micro, are good changes. They're all positive changes in my eyes. My point with this is really just to show how the design process can work to improve a product and to make changes to it that really benefit that product and benefit the user experience, not just the company that made it in some arbitrary way. And I think an important part of that is letting go of your personal connection to your design. It's difficult, but it's important not to get attached to one idea over another. If it works better and you can implement it in a way that works with the rest of the design visually, formally, if it functionally works better, that's the way to go. Now, there's nuance. I don't think that you should make changes to a product just for function and then just ignore if they work visually, if they work formally. Those two do have to balance and work together, and that's kind of the really difficult part of making a design and making a design work, is balancing those two ends of the scale. Because as much as we kind of want to say, oh well, as long as it works, I don't really care, we do. And the aesthetics are not just for show. They also tell you how to use a product, how you're intended to interact with it, what everything does. And that is all part of aesthetics, and that is all part of the formal elements of a product. And most of what we talked about today was changes to the formal elements, not the function. The function has remained the exact same throughout all of these changes. Moving the screen, for example, didn't change what the screen does. It simply moved it to a more user-friendly position. The leather siding, that didn't change any it didn't change any functional aspect of the light. It simply made it feel better, and it brought it more in line with the overall product's ethos and the overall goal for all of these products. And that is important. Any change in that direction, even if it doesn't change functionality, is affecting your user, because somebody who's coming to Hobolite is not somebody who is solely function focused, who is solely specs focused, because at least these lights don't offer the best bang for buck. And we'll get into that next week, but these lights don't offer the best bang for buck. They offer more than just powerful light output, more than just high CRI, more than base specs can kind of express. They offer an experience and a feeling, and that is important. And that's something that I kind of talked about with the Iris video, is that feeling of novelty, that feeling of a unique experience, that is important, especially in a creative field. And in any field, really. It's a similar reason to why people like custom mechanical keyboards. We like things that are pleasing. We like things that are pretty. Even if, yes, it doesn't affect the functionality, and yes, you should not buy something solely based on aesthetics and if it's pretty, but it helps. And it is an extremely important part of making a good product. Finding a visual identity and finding a visual language that speaks to your user base is very important and very useful to you as a designer. But that's it. I'm done evangelizing the design process. I just think that the Hobolite Mini is a very good example of that process being used well. And I think this, in contrast with the Micro, is a great point of comparison and a great example of how you can do that well. So yeah, that's this video. Like I said with all of these, I will try to keep them rather short. I have a lot of footage to comb through, but yes, that is it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you maybe learned something. Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, like it. If you disliked the video, dislike it. Make sure to leave a comment if you have something to say. I would really appreciate it. I always love having conversations with you guys. But yeah, that's it for today's video. I hope to see you here next time, and I hope you have a great day.